And our top focus, Russian missiles and drones have ripped through apartment blocks in Kyiv overnight, killing at least 17 people, including 4 children. President Volodymyr Zelensky said the attack showed Moscow's rejection of peace moves. International condemnation followed, with NATO Chief Mark Rutte warning against being naive about Vladimir Putin. Listen in.
People died. We know that innocent civilians and civilian infrastructure has been hit massively again by Russian attacks on Ukraine and particularly also on Kyiv. The EU delegation has been damaged. And I think this is again evidence to the points you all three made. Basically, the summary of what you said is we cannot be naive about Russia. We cannot be naive about Vladimir Putin. And last night is evidence of that. You took the leadership role. Next to the US, you spent most on support for Ukraine, practical support, and that's crucial. You help Ukraine to stay in the fight. Let's hope that all the initiatives the American president is taking will help. I really want to commend him for breaking the deadlock for Putin, to start a dialogue with the Russians. Let's hope this will lead to a durable and lasting peace for Ukraine. But in the meantime, we have to make sure that Ukraine has what it needs to stay as strong in the fight as possible and to bring them to this lasting and durable peace.
Britain has summoned Russia's ambassador. German Chancellor Friedrich Merz has condemned the strikes as scrumptious. UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres has strongly denounced the attack as well, renewing calls for a ceasefire that guarantees Ukraine's sovereignty. EU Chief Ursula von der Leyen has said that Europe will back a peace deal with credible security guarantees for Ukraine. The strike, one of the deadliest on Kyiv, blasted a 5-story crater, tore a building in two, and damaged the EU mission in a British Council office, sparking international protests. Rescuers have pulled bodies from the rubble as survivors described chaos and bloodshed. Ukraine's Air Force said Russia fired 629 missiles and drones overnight, its second largest barrage of the war. Zelensky has called it a deliberate killing of civilians, urging fresh sanctions on Moscow. That's the latest coming in from Russia, where missiles and drones have ripped through an apartment building in Kyiv overnight. 17 people have been killed, including 4 children. President Volodymyr Zelensky has said the attack has shown Moscow's rejection of peace moves. International condemnation followed, with NATO Chief Mark Rutte warning against being naive about Vladimir Putin. We've also learned that Britain has summoned Russia's ambassador. Meanwhile, the German Chancellor has condemned the strikes as scrumptious. UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres has strongly denounced the attack, renewing calls for a ceasefire that guarantees Ukraine's sovereignty. EU Chief Ursula von der Leyen has said that Europe will be backing a peace deal with credible security guarantees for Ukraine. And that's the latest coming in as far as the Russia-Ukraine war is concerned. The EU says that measures will have to be taken to turn Ukraine into a steel porcupine, and Europe will play its part. Mr. Mark Sutherland, geopolitical analyst, joins me on the broadcast. Mr. Sutherland, in your perspective, why do you think, on the one hand, Vladimir Putin is agreeing to peace talks? We've just had the first round in Alaska with Donald Trump. Trump has announced that preparations are on for the next round of talks, which will involve Zelensky as well. So on the one hand, there's an agreement for peace talks, but there's no agreement even for a temporary ceasefire. Why do you think so? Mr. Sutherland, can you hear me?
I can.
Mr. Sutherland, my question to you is, why do you think Vladimir Putin is not agreeing to a temporary ceasefire, even though he is agreeable to peace talks?
Well, the whole issue is that it's about the brinkmanship. that is what it's actually about. As you've recently seen, when they got together in Alaska, the fact that they are losing, over 1 million troops, etc. He's taken 20% of Ukraine, and it's about brinkmanship. He is really wanting to turn around and go, I want the Donbass region, I want this region, I want to hold this land. He is passionate about that. And if your next question was going to be, how do you stop it? The issue is this, is that Trump then has to put all those secondary tariff restrictions, sanctions in now. And the way to stop it and to stop this is to absolutely bring the oil price for Mr. Putin down through the floor and control that. And then he cannot finance his war effort. At the moment, according to various assessments, he has geared his military the whole economy up, that is bordering on being 50% of his economy to finance and adhere to this war. Thank you.
But Mr. Sutherland, some of the sanctions have clearly not worked on Russia. But my question to you is slightly different. I want to understand from you another perspective. We had heard after the first round of talks in Alaska that there could be a possibility of Ukraine being asked to give up parts of its territory. I want to understand from your perspective, what precedent would that set if America is able to convince Ukraine to do the same?
Sorry, you're right. That was on the table before, but how that works out in practice, when President Zelensky is saying no, that is not going to happen. As you are aware, that Mr. Trump has not been happy with India buying oil off Russia and then selling that on the open market. All of these all these issues are all at play in regard to this. So we then have a stalemate going back to that. If President Zelensky says no, I'm not going to give the land we're not going to concede any land, we need Russia to withdraw, then there's going to be an absolute stalemate in this situation. But more importantly, there was one meeting in Alaska. We need another meeting. And we need to be extremely consistent on that to work at how to stop this. And in the end, I think it will come down to economics and actually economically sanctioning Russia and bring it down to its knees, in my opinion.
But Mr. Sutherland, why has that strategy not worked for the past 3 years? That's the big question that everyone's asking when we talk about economic sanctions.
Thank you. Sorry to interrupt. It is the big question. But actually, when you are dealing with the fleet of oil tankers that they have, which they're called ghost ships, that are then registered under different countries' flags, if you then have ghost ships in the middle of the ocean transferring oil from one ship to another to hide the fact that they are Russian owned, those ships have to be pinpointed to then stop this as well. And also to look at, Trump hasn't done it, but to actually accelerate the sanctions in regard to oil and gas. And you are also aware that there is this tit for tat, that Ukraine has been firing many drones to begin to attack the Russian infrastructure in regard to oil and gas and ports. So you quite rightly, you asked that question, why hasn't this worked yet? Because I think in many ways, there's with President Trump, he passionately believes in personal relationships. He thinks he can actually talk to Vladimir, but then seeing the fact that maybe he can't, the Russians will not respond, so he then has to up the ante, and that's something in many ways he doesn't want to do. But actually, that could be the way to actually be beginning to see the end of this appalling war and the losses that we are witnessing.